Join me as we dive into a chilling tale of grief, guilt, and the shadows that live beneath the surface. This isn't just a story about fear, it's a journey through the darkest parts of the human mind. Are you ready to face the tide that never ends? Have you ever felt the weight of a memory so heavy it feels like drowning, trapped between what you've lost and what you can't let go? Imagine a man haunted not by ghosts, but by the salt that stays, clinging to his skin and soul. In the spring of 1913, I arrived in the village of Graymire, half by accident and half by doctor's orders. My physician, a grave man who spoke in florid euphemisms, had diagnosed me with what he called a neurasthenic collapse, a fashionable term, I suspect, for despair. He insisted I take respite in the country, preferably near the sea. I imagined whitewashed cottages and bright fishermen mending nets in the sun. Instead, I found Graymire. It was not listed on any modern map I consulted. A clerk at the Portsmouth station told me the old line to Graymire still ran on occasion, though he couldn't recall the last time it had been used. Curious and with nothing else to lose, I boarded the ancient coughing train and watched. As the countryside grew grayer, stranger, older, the village emerged from the mist like a bruise. Stone buildings with moss-clotted roofs leaned toward each other as though sharing secrets too old for the wind to carry. The fog was thick, clinging not only to the skin but to thought itself. Even as I stepped off the train and into the heavy air, I felt a curious dullness settle behind my eyes. It wasn't merely exhaustion, it was a kind of forgetting. A woman awaited me by the platform, a narrow figure wrapped in shawls and silence. She did not speak my name, but when I offered it, she only nodded. "You're late," she said without inflection. "House is ready." Her name, as it turned out, was Mrs. Thane. She owned the cottage where I would be staying, an arrangement made through letters that now seemed vague and strangely untraceable. She led me through Graymire's winding streets, past shuttered windows and shuttered people. None met my eyes. A group of children played with stones near a dry fountain, their game too quiet to hear. One looked up and smiled, showing blackened teeth. The house was squat, two-storied, and choked with ivy. It stood apart from the village proper, closer to the cliffs. The shutters clattered in the windless air. As Mrs. Thane turned the iron key in the lock, she said, "There is a cellar. You are not to enter it. The hinges are rusted shut anyway." I asked why. "Salt," she replied, and said no more. Inside, the house was dry and dim, as if even the light feared to linger. Dust lay thick on every surface. I wandered its rooms, a small sitting room with a cold fireplace, kitchen with pans hanging like relics, and upstairs a narrow hall with 2 bedrooms. And my room faced the sea, though the fog was so dense I could only sense its presence here. Even in the distant, slow churn of waves. Mrs. Thane left after lighting one oil lamp and warning me not to walk the beach after dark. "It doesn't like being watched," she said. "You'll understand soon." That night, I did not sleep well. My dreams were not dreams at all, but impressions, the sound of distant, rhythmic footsteps in the floorboards below, the smell of wet stone and brine creeping under the door. Worst of all, a voice I couldn't quite place, whispering from the direction of the cellar. I woke several times, my mouth filled with the taste of salt. When I rose at dawn, I found sand on the floor of my room, convinced it was simply a byproduct of the ocean wind and perhaps my own distracted unpacking. I cleaned it away and opened the window. The air outside was cold and still. The fog had not lifted. It never seemed to. A thick gray veil pressed against every surface, swallowing the horizon whole. I spent the morning exploring the village. There were no obvious shops, only a single grocer with jars of cloudy preserves and a butcher who did not speak. I asked after the town's history, but received only puzzled stares or muttered deflections. I might as well have asked them to. Explain time. Eventually I came upon a crumbling chapel near the cliffs. The stone was ancient and salted over, as if the sea had tried for decades to reclaim it.
Oh, you.
Inside, the pews were warped and damp. A stained glass window depicted no saints only. A dark figure standing in the sea, arms outstretched. Below it, etched into the stone altar, was a phrase, "Let the tide remember." I left the chapel quickly. Back at the house, I discovered something odd. Though I had locked the door behind me that morning, it now stood slightly ajar. Nothing appeared disturbed. Yet on the table in the sitting room lay a folded scrap of paper. It bore no seal, no signature only. A single sentence written in trembling ink. "You've been here before." I read it 3 times. The handwriting resembled my own, but I hadn't written it. I burned the note in the fireplace. The flames hissed. That evening, as darkness seeped into the corners of the room like oil, I sat and tried to write. I had told myself I would use this exile to begin my long-planned book study of the effects of isolation on the human mind. But the words would not come. Every time I lifted the pen, I felt the weight of unseen eyes behind me, and the blank page loomed like a shore I dared not step onto. By midnight, I gave up and went to bed. Sleep eluded me. I listened to the house breathe, to the wind, if it was wind murmuring low under the floor. At some point, I drifted into a shallow, sour slumber. I awoke in darkness. There were footsteps against low, deliberate, heavy with water. And then, a creak, the sound of a door not far below. I rose and lit the lamp. The air stank of seaweed. I crept down the stairs, the boards moaning underfoot, until I reached the cellar door. It was open, only a few inches, unmistakably open, and from within came the sound of dripping water and something else. A voice, low and blurred, like it came from underwater, we remember. The cellar door remained ajar for several minutes before I dared to move. I stood there, the oil lamp trembling in my hand, its flame throwing long shadows along the wall. The sound that had drawn me down dripping water, soft and steady, persisted, like a pulse in the bones of the house. But that other sound, the voice, it had ceased, or perhaps it had retreated like the tide. I pushed the door closed and latched it. The rusted latch screeched in protest as if it resented being disturbed. I considered driving a nail through it, but some odd part of me hesitated, as though something deeper inside wanted the door to remain just a little open, like an itch at the edge of thought. I returned to my room and sat by the window, the lamp burning low beside me. The fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. I watched it until dawn. The next morning, I walked to the cliffs. Graymire's shoreline was not the kind that welcomed picnics or sandcastles. The beach was all stone and kelp, black rocks slick with sea spit. The cliffs themselves were sheer and cracked, as if they too sought to collapse into the sea. Below, the tide came and went, without rhythm or sound, like the ocean had forgotten how to speak. I stood there, watching the water move with its strange silence, and tried to understand what was happening to me. Had the solitude, the endless, gray, frayed my nerves beyond reason? I was a man of letters, a rationalist. I did not believe in haunted houses or whispering cellars, but I did believe in the mind's capacity to fracture under pressure. And lately, mine felt like glass just before it breaks. As I turned to go, I saw a man seated at the edge of the cliff, an elderly figure in a long coat facing the sea. I had not heard him approach nor seen him before. He didn't look at me as I passed, but I felt the weight of his gaze when I walked behind him. "Did you hear it?" he asked, his voice cracked by age or salt. I paused. Hear what? The water, he said. It speaks different to each of us. Sometimes it remembers you, sometimes it lies. I'm sorry, I said, unsure if I should walk on or wait. You've come back, haven't you? The man went on. I wasn't sure you would. Most who leave don't. I knelt beside him, trying to see his face. His eyes were pale blue and unblinking. I've never been here before, I said slowly. He laughed softly, without humor. They all say that at first. Before I could ask more, he stood remarkably steady for his years and limped away down the cliff path. He didn't glance back. That afternoon I found another note. This one was not on paper. Instead, it was scratched into the glass of the mirror above the fireplace. Faint, nearly invisible unless the light hit it just so. The tide doesn't. Forget. I stared at the words for a long time, then heart racing, I dragged a cloth across them. The letters remained. I pressed my fingers to the glass. The scratches were real. It was then I remembered what Mrs. Thane had said. You'll understand soon. That evening, I took a long walk through Graymire, seeking conversation, or at the very least, sanity. The village was quiet, too quiet. In the square, I found a boy sitting alone on the fountain's dry rim. His knees were scabbed and dirty. He looked up at me with wide, too knowing eyes. Are you the one from the sea? He asked. I stopped cold. What do you mean? Said you went in a long time ago, but you came back wrong. Not all of you. Who told you that? He shrugged, the lady with the black mouth. She lives under the stones now. I had no response. I turned to leave, but he called out again. She says you dropped your name in the water. That's why you can't remember. That night, I returned to the cellar. I told myself I wouldn't open it. Told myself I would simply make sure it remained shut. But something compelled me. Something deeper than curiosity. It's colder than fear. I unlatched the door and opened it. The cellar was dark. My lamp's light seemed to hesitate at the threshold, unwilling to descend. The stairs were damp, and the smell brine and mildew, and something older, like forgotten things, clung to my throat at the bottom. I found the pool. It sat in a low stone basin, surrounded by half-crumbled masonry. The water within was still, black, oily. It didn't reflect my face. Only the ceiling above, except the ceiling it showed, was wrong. There were shapes moving across it, slow and shrouded. Then I saw it, etched into the stone beside the pool. In a ring were names. Dozens. Some scratched, some carved. Many had been worn away by time and salt, and one of them, one still clear, unmarred, was mine. Not just my surname. My full name, middle initial included. I staggered back, breath catching in my throat. Behind me, a door creaked. Then I heard the voice again, low and unmistakable, echoing up from the black pool. You gave yourself to us. We only held you safe. Why, did not sleep that night, after. I fled the cellar, slamming the door and pressing a chair against it like a child fearing monster's eye. Sat in the sitting room until the lamp burned out. I did not light another. In the dark, I tried to convince myself of something simple, something sane, that the name carved in the stone was a coincidence, that I had hallucinated the voice, that I was unwell, and my doctor had simply sent me too far from people. But none of those explanations held against what I had felt, the recognition. The way my body had remembered the stone steps even before my mind did. And more troubling still, a growing part of me felt relief, as if something hidden had been acknowledged at last. At dawn, I wrote my name out on a page. Julius Hartby. 1875. I stared at the letters, trying to affirm my existence. Then I closed my eyes and asked myself a question I had never asked. With real seriousness, what do I remember before Graymire? Fragments surfaced in an apartment in London? A woman with sharp fingers and tired eyes, ink on my cuffs, the taste of black tea. All hazy, like scenes behind wet glass. And then another memory, sharper than the rest. Standing in front of a different mirror, one I could not place, with seawater dripping from my sleeves. My mouth was open, whispering something I could not hear. I tore the page and burned it in the hearth. Later that morning, Thane returned. She brought no food, no firewood, only stood in the doorway, her hands clutching her shawl tight across her chest. Her face was drawn tighter than I remembered. "You've been to the cellar," she said. It was not a question. I didn't answer. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. "They'll know now. It was never about keeping you out. It was about keeping them asleep." "Who are they?" I asked. "Who's we?" She looked around the sitting room, as if seeing it for the first time, though she must have known it her whole life. This house wasn't always here. Graymire wasn't always here. Some places gather. Salt, secrets, the things people try to throw away, like names. Mrs. Thane blinked, slowly, especially names. I asked her then what I had been afraid to. "Have I been here before?" She looked at me for a long time, and her eyes softened not with pity, but with a kind of mourning. "You came ashore 12 years ago, soaked through, empty-eyed. You didn't speak for 2 weeks. The sea keeps what it takes, but sometimes it returns something else in its place, and you just let me stay." "No one stays in Graymire," she whispered. "I just wait." I stepped closer. "Wait for what?" Her gaze flicked toward the cellar, for the tide to come back and finish what it started. Then she turned and left. I did not stop her. I wandered the village in a daze. The fog was thicker than ever, a pale curtain between me and the world. Faces loomed briefly, vanished. Footsteps echoed without owners. The chapel bells rang at midday, though no one touched them. I passed an old woman in a window who stared at me with eyes like broken glass. Finally, I returned to the square. The boy was there again. He was drawing in the dirt with a stick, looping circles, spirals, and symbols that made my teeth ache to look at. When he noticed me, he grinned. "You've seen the pool," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You knew I would. They all do. In the end, it calls you back." "What is it? Some kind of well?" he said. "But deeper, older. It remembers the shapes we were before we had names." I crouched beside him. "How do you know these things?" My granddad told me, and he learned from his mum. "The sea doesn't forget stories. It just drowns them, until it's ready to tell them again." I stared at the spirals he drew. He felt familiar in the worst way, like symbols I had seen in dreams, or drawn in notebooks I didn't remember owning. "Do you know who I am?" I asked him. "You were someone else," he said. "Now you're mostly this. But not all of you made it back." Then he leaned forward and whispered, "Don't go near the water when it's quiet. It's when it listens." That night the sea was silent. No waves. No wind. Only a low hum beneath the earth, like breath held too long. I stayed upstairs, the lamp burning low beside me, watching the fog swirl over the cliffs. I kept the cellar door bolted, but I could feel it pulling at the corners of my thoughts. Just after midnight, I found another message. Not a note this time. It was written in condensation on the window pane. "We remember what you were. You asked to be taken. You begged." I wiped it away with my sleeve and did not sleep. By the next morning, the fog had thinned. I could see the ocean again, still, unnaturally smooth, like glass over something, waiting to break free. I resolved to leave. Whatever madness I had found or brought with me had grown teeth. I packed a satchel, gathered my journal, and the few belongings I'd brought. But when I arrived at the train station, the tracks were gone. Not broken, not covered asterisk, just absent. Where iron rails had once run, there was now only salt-worn gravel and tall, indifferent grass. As if no train had ever come here at all, there was only one other person. There, the old man from the cliffs. He sat on the bench, arms folded, and when he saw me, he shook his head. "There's no leaving once the tide knows your name," he said. "The sea brought you back for a reason. You have to finish it." "Finish what?" He stood. "Whatever it was you started down there in the water." And then he whispered, "She's waiting." I returned from the train station hollowed out, as if something essential had been removed from me during the walk back. The village was unchanged, silent, blurred, watching. But I saw it differently now. The fog no longer seemed like a trick of weather, but an intentional presence. It's a mindless guardian that kept the world out and those inside from leaving. I didn't unpack. I couldn't. My bag sat untouched by the door. But every part of me knew it was too late for escape. That evening, I searched the house. There were things I had ignored before, little oddities that now clanged like bells in my awareness. A bookshelf, with volumes written in no language I recognized. A wardrobe in the guest room that never seemed to stay closed. And most unsettling of all, a rusted key tucked beneath a loose board in the floor of the bedroom. The metal was crusted with old salt. I held it in my palm for a long time before tucking it into my coat pocket. I knew what had opened. I just didn't know why it was hidden in my room. At dusk, I returned to the chapel. The air inside was heavier than before, as if even light hesitated to enter. The stained glass window, the one with the figure standing in the sea, glimmered faintly, its hues more vivid than they had any. Right to be, I approached the altar. "Let the tide remember," the inscription still read. But something had changed. There was now a second line beneath it, barely visible, etched in with a different hand. "And let the drowned forget." It struck me like a blow. The weight of it, the logic of it. What if that was the trade? What if I had come here once before, not to escape, but to be erased? I opened the chapel's side door, which led into a crypt I had seen marked on no map. The air turned colder the deeper I went. Walls beaded with moisture. The path sloped gently, almost imperceptibly. Toward the sea at the bottom was a shallow chamber lit only by lichen and the weak gleam of bioluminescent mold. In the center stood a stone pedestal, and atop it a book, bound in seal leather, the cover glistening wet lie. I opened it. There were no titles, no preface, only page after page of names. Thousands of them, some inked clearly, others half washed away as though time or salt water had gnawed at them. My name was there, not once. 3 times, each entry slightly different, dates mismatched, details vague. And beneath the final instance, a scrawl in black, returned incomplete. I left the chapel feeling less like a visitor and more like an unfinished thought. When I arrived back at the house, the lamp in my room had already been lit. I hadn't touched it. The cellar door stood wide open. No sound came from below.
I'll wait.
The scent overwhelming of brine, iron, and decay. I felt the key shift in my coat pocket like a weight rediscovered. This time, descended with it in hand. The pool was waiting, still and dark, but not alone. She stood beside it, not in. The water beside it. A woman, tall, draped in sea-slit cloth that clung to her in folds like drowned sails. Her hair was long, tangled with weed and bits of shell. Her skin was pale gray, but not lifeless. Her face was neither young nor old, neither kind nor cruel. She did not blink. I froze halfway down the stairs. "You remember?" she said. Her voice was not wet, but deep, not echoing in the room, but inside my skull. "I don't," I replied. "You asked for forgetting. I gave it. but you never let go. My hands gripped the key. Who are you? I asked. What am I? She stepped closer. Her eyes were black, not dark, not shadowed black, like the pool, like the sky before a storm. And her mouth, when she opened it to speak again, was full of seawater. Name yourself, she whispered, or I will. Something moved in the water behind her, slow, immense, circling just beneath the surface. I raised the key. Is this what locks you away? She smiled, and drops of salt rolled down her cheeks. No, that was what you made. To keep the pieces apart. Pieces. You didn't just leave yourself behind. You tore it out and buried it in the water. And now, her smile faded. It's hungry. The shadows thickened. I stepped back, up the stairs, heart hammering. She didn't follow, but her final words chased me up the steps like a tide. Names are not lost. They wait. And yours is almost done waiting. Back in my room, I bolted the door. I could still taste salt on the back of my tongue. I tried to write, but my hands shook too badly. My reflection in the mirror shimmered, as though the glass were slowly turning to water, and when I looked again, it was not my face I saw, but a blank sea-washed mask with no eyes and a mouth full of sand. I awoke in the middle of the night. The lamp long cold and my room colder still. The window had frosted over with salt. I hadn't known salt could freeze, yet here it was. In delicate patterns across the glass, spirals, symbols, shapes I had seen before, in the dirt drawn by the boy. In the book beneath the chapel, even echoing in the stitching on the clothes the woman in the cellar wore, I wiped at it with my sleeve. For a moment, just one breathless blink, I saw her on the other side, standing in the fog, inches from the glass, watching. No expression, no breath. Then she was gone. I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I walked through Graymire and saw that it had changed, though in ways that seemed to defy explanation. The streets were where I remembered them, the buildings still leaning as before. But the air was different, thicker, closer. People walked slower, like they were half asleep or underwater. I passed a fisherman standing perfectly still in his doorway, staring at the sky with dead eyes. When I greeted him, he blinked, slowly, as though it took great effort. You're unraveling, he said. I stopped. What? Your name doesn't fit right anymore. It's slipping. Then he simply turned and closed the door. At the grocer's, I found Mrs. Thane. She stood near a wall of dusty jars. Hands folded. You should leave, she said. I tried, I replied. The tracks are gone. She didn't look surprised. They were never really there. Not for people like you. People like me. She looked up, eyes narrowing. You brought something back, Mr. Hart. Or maybe something brought you back. Either way, it doesn't want to share you. I need answers, I said. Firmer now. What's in the pool? Her lips thinned. The drowned. The forgotten. Everything someone tried to throw away. Did I die? No. You were given back before that could happen. She reached into her bag and handed me something wrapped in cloth. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a silver locket. Badly tarnished, the chain frayed. I recognized it immediately, though I didn't know how. This was mine, I whispered. Yes. You gave it to her. She turned to leave. To keep you anchored. I returned to the house and opened the locket. Inside were two things. A faded photograph of myself, different than now, younger, with salt-stiff hair, and, opposite it, a note. A single folded scrap. If you come back, remember, the salt clings. Don't believe her mouth. Bury what you took. There was no signature, but the handwriting was mine. And suddenly I remembered, not a moment, but a sensation kneeling at the edge of the pool with the locket in my hand, whispering to it before dropping it into the water. Why had I done that? That evening, I sat at the desk in my room and wrote in my journal. I tried to collect my thoughts, put things into rational terms, but I found the pages already filled, written in my handwriting. Pages. And pages of memories I did not recall writing. Descriptions of dreams, voices, rituals. One passage stood out. She took the part of me that begged, wept, that remembered the pain. I asked her to drown it, but I never asked what else she would take. I should have known better. The sea never gives back the same shape twice. Below it was a sketch done, in my own clumsy lines of the pool, and beneath that, a symbol, the same spiral the boy had drawn in the dirt. Something changed in me then. Some threads snapped. I needed to finish this. I needed to return to the cellar, not in fear, but in confrontation. Took the silver locket, a knife from the kitchen, and the rusted key. My heart pounded with the clarity of decision. When I unlocked the final lock on the cellar door, the air grew instantly wet. Not humid, not damp. Wet. As if the walls had begun to breathe the sea. The stairs groaned underfoot as I descended. She was there again, not waiting at the pool this time, standing beside the far wall, as though studying the stone. "You came back," she said. "I remember more now," I replied, her head tilted. "Then you know what you gave me?" "I gave you the pain," I said. "The guilt. The part of me that couldn't live with what happened." She smiled, slow and wide. "And what did you do, Julius?" I clutched the locket tightly. "I don't." "No, you do," she said, stepping forward, grass to be hollowed out. "You begged to forget what you'd done." The sea took that burden, and now it's waking. Behind her, the pool rippled. Something large brushed the surface from beneath, briefly raising the water before vanishing again. "Then give it back," I said. "Why?" she whispered. "You came here to be free of it, 'cause I don't know who I am without it." I said, "Because if I leave this house again without knowing, I'll never be a whole man." Her expression shifted, not anger, but regret. "You can't take it all back," she said. "It's not just yours anymore. And take what's left." I opened the locket and dropped it into the pool. The water hissed. The ripple spread. Outward, darkening, frothing. Shapes moved within it. Faces, limbs, memories. Screams muffled by depth. Hand burst from the surface, not flesh. But salt and bone and memory, then silence. The pool stilled, and she was gone. I climbed the stairs. Alone, as I reached the top, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror, and for the first time, I saw myself not young, not old, but full, whole and smiling. Because now, I remembered everything. The woman I loved, the one who drowned, the storm I couldn't stop, the guilt I couldn't carry, the night I came to Graymire and asked to forget it all. But the questions still hung in the air. What had come back with me? The silence that followed my return from the cellar was heavier than before. Not absence of sound silence, but the kind that fills every space with something unseen. The stillness of an empty jar. For the first time since I arrived, the house felt empty. And that frightened me more than her presence ever had. I now knew what I'd come to Graymire to forget. I remembered the ship, the storm, the screaming. I remembered her, the woman I had loved, and how she had slipped from my hands and vanished beneath the waves. But remembering didn't bring peace. It brought something else, something that had followed me back that morning. The village looked different again. The fog had receded, not completely, but in a way that revealed more of Graymire than I had yet seen. There were houses I didn't remember, alleyways where no paths had been, and people, more of them than before, but none of them met my eyes. They walked like sleepwalkers, faces blank, steps measured. Even the boy from the fountain was gone. I found Mrs. Thane standing outside her home, her hands wet with seawater, though the sea was nowhere in sight. "You went too far," she said. I remembered. She shook her head, slow and sorrowful. That was never the danger. What was?
Bring it back with you.
I opened my mouth, but she raised a trembling hand. "When people come to Graymire to forget," she said, "something must be left in place of what they give up. And when they remember again, what was left doesn't disappear, just loses its cage." Back at the house, the mirror in the hallway was cracked. Hairline fractures split my reflection like veins, spidering out from the center of my face. I raised my hand to touch a tan in the reflection. I did not move. My reflection stood still, staring at me. Then it smiled. A slow, wide smile, not mine. I staggered back. The glass rippled like water, then returned to stillness. This time, I did not see myself at all, only the ocean. That night, the dreams returned, but they were not dreams. They were memories that didn't belong to me. Or perhaps they did, fragments of the part I left behind in the pool. I saw through its eyes, drifting through black water, nameless, weightless. I saw figures in the dark, mouths open and soundless screams. I saw her face again, my loved this time. I saw the truth. I let her go, not by accident, not by fate, by choice, because I was afraid. I woke with blood in my mouth, the taste of salt on my tongue, and a name echoing in my ears that was not my own. I spent the following day reading every word in the journal I had supposedly written. Pages appeared that hadn't been there before. They weren't mine. Asterisk, different handwriting, different voice. One passage chilled me. He was supposed to forget. That was the deal. But he clung too tightly. Part that was cast off began to grow teeth. Now it wants to live. Another read. He fed it with grief. It learned hunger from him. Now it remembers being whole. The entries ended abruptly. The final page was blank. Until I blinked on them. Suddenly it wasn't. You opened the door. Now it walks in your skin. The next change came just after sunset. The house sighed. I don't know how else to describe it. The walls seemed to flex inward, like breath drawn too deeply. The floors creaked not with weight, but with purpose. I smelled salt rising from the boards. I walked to the mirror again. This time I didn't hesitate. My reflection stood there, smiling, still cracked, still not quite me. Then it spoke. Its lips moved, but no sound came. Instead, I heard it inside my head. You were a vessel. Now you are a door. Then it raised its hand, and on its palm was a spiral burned into the skin. I looked down. My own palm was unmarked. For now I went outside for air, though there was little to breathe. The fog had thickened again, but now it moved with intent, gathered around houses. It flowed through alleyways, and there were shapes in its hole, slow-walking figures with mouths open to wide and eyes black as the pool. One of them turned toward me. It did not approach. It only whispered, its voice like the sound of waves crashing from a great distance. Let us, and I don't remember how long I stood there. At some point I returned inside. The mirror was gone. In its place was a window that hadn't been there before, and through it I saw not the village but the pool. Somehow, impossibly, the pool was now part of the house. Or perhaps the house had returned to the pool. The voices came again, this time from every room. Low, wet voices, familiar voices. My own voice, dozens of iterations of it, whispering, laughing, screaming, let us speak, let us live. Let us finish what you began. I backed into the kitchen, gripping the journal in one hand. The silver locket now around my neck. There was nowhere left to run to. I whispered. My shadow stepped toward me, not across the floor, behind me, but through. This time, as though the light had never cast it, but birthed it. It moved like me. It was wrong. It tilted its head too far. Its smile was too wide. Its eyes, where mine should have been hollow with fear, were filled with hunger. Curious hunger. Not the kind that wants food. It's the kind that wants place, shape, self. It opened its mouth, and I braced for a sound, but no sound came. Instead, a taste of blood and brine, as if the air itself had turned to ocean water. It pointed at my chest. At the locket, "You left that part too long," it said, voice scraping like driftwood across stone. "Now it rots." I backed away, through the doorway and into the hall. But the house had changed again. The walls pulsed softly, breathing. Damp. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. Floorboards bowed, bloated with moisture. The paintings along the hallway, all seascapes, all indistinct, were now moving. The waves inside them churned. The skies above them darkened with storm, and in each one, figures stood on the shore, waiting. I locked myself in the study. Not that it would stop anything. The lock was more ritual than defense. A meaningless barrier to give shape to panic. Inside, I sat at the desk and opened the journal again. I found a blank page and wrote furiously, without stopping, as if by writing I could anchor myself to a moment of truth. Single sentence. Over and over, "I am Julia's heart. I am Julia's heart. I am Julia's heart." And then, after the fourth repetition, my hand shifted. I didn't mean it to. I didn't notice until it had written something else entirely. I stared at it. The pen fell from my fingers, and suddenly, I remembered a night knot long before the storm that took her when. I stood at the edge of the sea and asked it to take me instead. The sea did not answer, but something else did. There was a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. I said nothing. The doorknob turned once, then stopped. A voice followed mine, but muffled, as if speaking through water-soaked cloth. "You cannot carry both." I pressed my back to the door, breath held, eyes wide. "I don't want either," I whispered, "but you made a choice." The voice replied, "You asked to be hollow. We filled you." Eventually, the voice retreated. I emerged from the study cautiously. The hallway had stretched longer than it had any right to be. Doors I didn't remember lined the walls now, and at the end of the corridor, the cellar door was open again. From its depths came a faint, rhythmic sound, breathing, not human breathing, the kind of sound a sea trench might make in its sleep. I descended again, not because I wanted to, because I had to. There are moments in a life when we are no longer deciding, only following the thread of a choice. It's already made. The pool was different now, no longer still. It churned slowly, a silent cyclone in a stone basin, and beside it, not in it, not quite, stood the woman. Her face was clearer now. I recognized her, not from life, from memory, from the locket. She had been mine, or perhaps I had been hers. Her eyes met mine. "You remembered the pain," she said, "but not the promise." "What promise?" I asked. "You said you would carry it, all of it, even the part that wasn't yours. But when it grew teeth, you threw it away. You gave me your guilt. Watch. But you left your cowardice loose." Behind her, something rose in the pool. Not a shape, shadow, like steam but dark, forming vague limbs and a face that rippled constantly, as if it could never quite decide what to be. It wore my features, briefly, then hers, then someone I didn't recognize. But who wept? "You are its boundary," she whispered. But your name no longer holds. I pulled the locket from my neck. It felt heavier now, inside. The photo had changed. It now showed the woman standing beside me, but where my face should have been, there was only a smudge, as though salt had melted the ink. The note inside was gone. In its place, a single mark, the spiral. I want it back, I said. She turned her gaze to me slowly. What? The peace I gave you, the grief, the guilt, the pain. I want it back. She stepped aside. The shadow in the pool quivered, watching. You can't take it without taking the rest, she said. I know, and will fight you, so. I stepped to the edge of the pool. The water rippled with every heartbeat. My reflection twisted, and the surface sometimes me, sometimes not. I reached in. The water clung to my hand like cold oil. Something grabbed my wrist. Not a hand. Not flesh. A weight. A presence. A memory. Her drowning. Not from above. Not as I had remembered. But from below, her eyes finding mine as I let go. Not an accident, decision. Because I was afraid. Because I could not save us both. Because in that moment, I chose myself. The weight hit me like a tide. I stumbled back, gasping, soaked to the bone. The woman was gone. The pool was still. But I was not alone. In the wet stone floor behind me, my shadow moved again. This time it screamed, not aloud. Inside, you brought it back. You brought it back. Then it sank into the floor and disappeared. Asterisk. Returned upstairs in silence. The house was quieter now, but not peaceful. Something was watching from every mirror. Every window, every knot in the wood. I looked at my palm. The spiral was there now. Red, raised, burning, and beneath my skin, I felt it moving, not a parasite, not a possession, a returning. The burning spiral beneath my skin throbbed like a heartbeat. Not painful, exactly more like a presence. A pulse. Something alive deep inside me, demanding acknowledgement. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible in the mirror. My reflection was fractured again, but this time the cracks weren't just lines. They were tiny rivers of salt, trickling. Down the glass like tears, and behind my eyes, behind my thoughts, there was a voice. Not my voice, cold, patient, waiting. We remember, it said softly. The days blurred. Time lost meaning in the house. Sometimes the sun would rise and set without. Me noticing, sometimes the fog would curl through the rooms, filling every corner with damp cold. I stopped leaving. The village became a distant memory, a fading dream. But inside me, the spirals spread. It was growing. Sometimes I felt it tightening like a noose around my heart. Sometimes it whispered secrets sold, promises, broken oaths, names I had never heard. It showed me glimpses of the pool, of the woman, of the dark shape beneath the water that wore my face. One night, I awoke to find the room flooded with salt, not grains of salt, but walls of salt. A fortress built from frozen sea. In the center, the woman stood waiting. Her eyes were brighter now. She reached out, and my hand passed through her like water. You carry too much, she said.
No, I whispered. I carry what I must. Then the salt will keep you, she said, or drown me. Underscore, 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 underscore. I woke drenched in sweat, gasping, but the spiral burned deeper. I no longer knew where I ended and the salt began. Underscore, 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 underscore. The house was no longer mine. It was a vessel, and so was I. The spiral beneath my skin pulsed relentlessly, a quiet but insistent rhythm that matched the beat of my heart, or perhaps the heartbeat of something else living inside me. I tried to ignore it, to push it down, but it was futile. The salt had become more than a mark. It was a wound and a whisper, a tether pulling me toward fate I both feared and could not resist. Each day the spiral grew warmer beneath the surface, like molten metal threading through my veins. I felt it shifting, moving beneath my flesh, insinuating itself into my thoughts, blurring the edges of my own mind. Sleep was no longer a refuge. When I closed my eyes, I was pulled back to pool, trapped beneath its cold surface, drowning in memories that weren't fully mine. The woman's face haunted me, not as a victim, but as a queen of some ancient, drowned realm, imperious and cruel, yet fractured with grief. Sometimes she spoke without words, and I understood her demands. The sea had taken what I offered, but now it demanded repayment. The salt that stayed was a price I was yet to comprehend. Outside, Graymire became a ghost town in my memories. I heard the distant cries of gulls and the crashing of waves, but the village itself felt more like a place out of time, a faded picture in a book I couldn't open again. I no longer saw the fishermen, no longer heard the boys' strange mutterings by the fountain. Only the fog remained, thickening and curling around the edges of the world like a living thing, swallowing sound and light. It crept into the corners of the house, curling through the cracks in the floor and seeping from the walls. The air tasted faintly of salt and decay. I remained inside, confined not by locks or fear, but by the growing certainty that there was nowhere else for me to go. The house had shifted. It no longer resembled the building I had first entered. Hallways stretched impossibly long, ceilings lowered as if to crush me, and windows revealed endless stretches of stormy sea rather than village streets. The very floor beneath my feet sometimes rippled, like water lapping against a hull. The boundary between solid earth and shifting water was dissolving, and I felt myself becoming part of the tide. My reflection in the mirror had become a stranger. It moved with a delay, a hesitation, as though it were tethered to me by threads of salt and shadow. Sometimes the eyes looking back were too bright, too knowing, filled with sorrow and something darker, a hunger and accusation. I spoke to that reflection, desperate for answers, but it only smiled sadly and whispered secrets I could not fully understand. Its words were fragments, caught between speech and silence. One afternoon, as the light dimmed and the house seemed to breathe around me, I found myself in the cellar again. The pool had changed. It was no longer a simple basin of water, but a living thing, rippling and swirling with currents I could not trace. Shapes moved beneath the surface, shadows that flickered between faces, sometimes mine, sometimes hers, sometimes something utterly unknown and alien. The woman stood by the edge, watching me with eyes that bore both sorrow and fury. "You carry too much," she said softly, "but still it is not enough. What more is there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She smiled, and the pool churned violently. "Balance. Exchange. The salt must settle or will consume you." I looked into the water, and for a moment, I saw the past and future intertwined. Memories of drowning, betrayal, love, and loss all mingling beneath the surface like spilled ink. I wanted to reach in and touch the water, to take back what I had lost, but I feared what I might pull up from the depths. The woman stepped closer. "You will have to choose. The salt or the shadow. The grief or the forgetting." I stumbled back and fled the cellar, but the choice haunted me. Each step I took was heavier, burdened with the weight of what I had become. The spiral burned hotter, and my skin prickled with the sensation of countless eyes watching from just beyond sight. The house whispered in the dark, voices rising and falling like tides, weaving together stories of those who had come before me. Souls trapped in the endless cycle of loss and reclamation. That night, the salt came alive. It seeped from the cracks in the walls, curling around my ankles like seaweed. I tried to shake it off, but it clung and wrapped tighter, pulling me toward the floor. The spiral on my palm flared red hot, and I cried out as the salt spread up my arm, cold and burning all at once. In the darkness, I saw the shadow again, my shadow, detached from me, hovering just beyond reach. It mimicked my every movement with eerie precision, but its eyes burned with something I dared not name. The shadow spoke to me then, not with words but with images, visions of a life I had forgotten or perhaps never lived. A child lost beneath the waves. A promise broken on a stormy night. The sea claiming all that I was and could have been. I wanted to resist, to fight back, but the salt and shadow had already seeped deep into my bones. As dawn broke, I found myself standing at the window, looking out at a sea that had swallowed the village. The horizon was blurred, endless and hungry. The salt on my skin glistened like dew, and the spiral burned faintly, a reminder that the boundary between man and ocean had long since been crossed. I was no longer just Julia's heart. I was something else. A vessel, a warning, the salt that stays. The house held its breath. The silence pressed down on me, thick and unyielding, like a weight made of water and salt. Every creak, every sigh of the old timber seemed muffled, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something. Something I couldn't yet name but felt creeping closer. I stood at the threshold of the cellar. The spiral burned deep beneath my skin. It was no longer just a mark. It was a living thing, a pulse in my blood, a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart in the slow, relentless tide beyond the village. It throbbed like a second heartbeat, a reminder that I was tethered to something older, darker, and inescapable. The salt was everywhere now, both inside me and all around. It clung to the corners of the house, seeped from cracks in the walls, crystallized on the floorboards like frost. I felt it under my feet as I moved, a rough grit that seemed to crawl into my very bones. The spiral glowed faintly in the dim light, a beacon of pain and memory that refused to be buried. I took a deep breath and opened the cellar door. The stale air greeted me, thick with the scent of brine and decay. The steps groaned beneath my weight as I descended into the cold depths where the pool waited, black and endless. She stood there, the woman, the queen of the drowned realm, both beautiful and terrible. Her eyes were endless oceans, deep and dark, filled with storms and sorrow. She watched me silently, the faintest curve of a smile on her lips. "You can still choose," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, like the last sigh of a dying wave. "You can carry it all, or you can let go and become the sea." I swallowed hard. The weight of my choices, the past I'd buried and the future I feared, crashed over me like a tidal wave. I looked into the pool's black surface, the darkness rippling like a veil between worlds. What choices left me? I asked, voice raw. "To carry it, or to lose yourself to forgetting," she said. "The salt binds, but it also frees." I stepped closer, the chill of the cellar creeping into my bones. The pool stirred at my approach, ripples spreading like fractured memories. The water was cold beyond imagining, and when I reached out, the surface trembled, swallowing the light. Cold surged through me, sharp and biting, a shock that burned and froze all at once. The pool was not just water. It was time, loss, and regret made liquid. It pulled me in, not just my body, but the tangled threads of my memory, the grief I'd tried to cast off like a stone. I was drowning again, submerged beneath dark waves that whispered secrets in voices both my own and utterly alien. The salt weighed me down, thick and suffocating, but somewhere in the depths, I found a strange clarity. I remembered the night I'd chosen to forget, the night I had let her slip beneath the waves. Not by accident, but by choice, because I was afraid, because I had tried to save myself and abandoned everything else. But now, beneath the surface, I made a different choice. I would carry the weight, not as a punishment, not as a prisoner, but as a keeper. I would hold the salt and the shadow, the memory and the loss. Because some burdens are not meant to be forgotten. They are meant to be borne. The spiral beneath my skin flared with light, then settled into a quiet glow. The burning ache in my chest softened, replaced by a cold resolve. The salt no longer threatened to consume me. It was a part of me now, a mark of what I had survived and what I must protect. The woman stepped forward, her eyes softening with something like sorrow. You have become the salt that stays. Her words echoed in the hollow chamber of the cellar. I felt the truth in them like a tide pulling me home. I was no longer just a man haunted by loss. I was a vessel between worlds, a bridge between the past and the present, between memory and oblivion. The pool stilled, its dark surface smooth as glass. The house seemed to exhale, the silence around me shifting from oppressive to peaceful. Somewhere beyond the walls, the fog thinned and the distant sound of the tide receded, leaving behind the quiet stillness of a shore at dawn. I stepped back in the pool and rose from the depths. The spiral on my palm pulsed softly, a heartbeat in time with my own. Outside, the world was changing. The village reappeared, dim and distant, like a dream I'd almost forgotten. The fog lifted, revealing cracked stones and weathered walls touched by the first light of day. I walked through the house, feeling the salt beneath my feet, but no longer fearing it. The shadows followed, but they did not hunger. They watched with quiet patience, as if waiting for the next chapter to unfold. In the mirror, my reflection was whole again. The cracks had vanished, and the eyes looking back were clear, though deeper, older, marked by sorrow and strength. The spiral burned faintly beneath my skin, a silent promise I carried with me. I touched the locket around my neck. The photo inside had changed, no longer blurred or smudged. It showed her smiling, alive in memory, held forever in salt and shadow. I knew now that forgetting was impossible. The past could not be cast away like a stone. It lived within us, salt and shadow intertwined. And those who come to Graymire to forget must learn that some things stay, etched in skin and bone, carried in heart and soul. The tide's end was not an end at all. It was a beginning, a cycle unbroken, the salt that stays. Underscore, 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 underscore. The house stood still as the dawn light spilled through its windows, and in the silence, the salt whispered. If this story stirred something deep inside you, whether it's curiosity, fear, or a chill you can't shake, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales that haunt the mind and linger in the shadows. Share your thoughts or your own stories in the comments below. And remember, some memories never fade, they stay, like salt on the skin,